I've just been told by C-SPAN that I'm addressing the most serious audience I've ever addressed all these years. And so thank you for coming. This is not an ordinary book. We live in an age of muckraking expose documentaries and an age of muckraking books on almost every abuse in industry and government and who knows what. And yet very little has happened. So we're operating in a kind of asymptotic curve with exposés. Years ago, there were far fewer exposés, and more happened. We had people in Congress who took some of these exposés seriously. We had some judges who took some of them seriously. We had people in the White House who signed off on legislation under Lyndon Johnson and Nixon. Nixon was the last Republican to be afraid of liberals. He signed bills he loathed. He signed the Environmental Protection Agency bill, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration bill. He signed the Product Safety bill, and he wanted more. He actually was the last president to propose to Congress a minimum incomes plan to reduce poverty and a drug policy plan that focused on rehabilitation, not incarceration. They didn't pass. He also supported voting rights for people here in the District of Columbia, America's foremost colony. This was Richard Nixon. So when we look back at Richard Nixon, it was some nostalgia. You can see how we've declined since then. And this brings me to this effort in this book, 17 Solutions. Sometimes when we just deal with exposés, they either alarm people, astonish people, anger people, or overwhelm people. And the result is no follow-up. We don't have that many people in Congress or in the courts or in the White House, as we did in the 60s and 70s, to connect with these exposés. When they saw them on TV or the books came out, there were hearings, there was litigation, there were statements from the White House. We don't have that anymore. And therefore, we can't just rely on exposés. We got to recognize there's a banality now to exposés, although they're very, very important. They're the predicate for doing something and changing something. We've got to focus on solutions that embody as their rationale the descriptions that come out of the exposés. In that sense, we sort of leap over the mere anger or alarm or feeling overwhelmed, the passivity of it all, and focus people on redirections. Now, we happen to live in a country that's full of problems we don't deserve and solutions we don't apply. And the gap is the democracy gap. The gap is a massive withdrawal from democratic engagement, even by the small number of people who used to engage. Not that there's no one who engages, not that there are people in every community who aren't engaged, but my guess is there are a smaller percentage of people who are in the first stage of engagement, intense, second stage, backup, third stage, showing up for rallies and marches, showing up in city council halls. Half of democracy is showing up. Those of you who are under 30 in this room, you can assail yourself as being a generation that doesn't show up. And you don't show up in part because you've grown up corporate without a fraction of the civic experience of people who were fighting the civil rights battle as students in the South and in other parts of the country, putting Earth Day on the map for environmental focus in April 1970, 1,500 events around the country, and being embroiled in controversy over the Vietnam War, student rights on campus, many other issues. Those gave students experience. They came back, they talked to students who didn't go out with them. It was an educational process. They had teach-ins. They didn't look at screens all the time. They didn't have text messages. They didn't have email. they had to face each other. And therefore you would see at cafeterias arguments and discussion about the major confrontations. It did help to have the draft. You're part of the risk, you're part of the solution. Now, so your generation needs to sober up, get out of virtual reality a little more, get into reality, and realize that there's no change without person-to-person mobilization in real life. You can get information off the internet, you can find out of events in the internet. Nothing happens without real-life exchange, and that's what the Occupy Wall Street tried to show in their 3 months last year when they had the eye of the mass media. Encampments, 24 hours a day, very, very personal. Now, I can overcome anything in an audience but a little baby. And this is about your future, little baby. So, sleep away for a while. Now, let me discuss something very personal in terms of all of us. The theme of this book is that democracy works, that it's a lot easier than you think, that it takes a lot smaller number of people to lead the way in communities distributed, say, in congressional districts, because Congress is the pivot here for a lot of these redirections. But people make excuses for themselves. These are not people who can barely get through the day because they're so poor. These are people who have time. These are people who have a level of flexibility in their personal life to engage some hours in the civic culture. That's very, very important. But they make excuses for themselves, and those of us who go around the country trying to mobilize people, trying to get them out, try to get them to express their creative civic juices, who can think up of a fraction of the tactics and strategies that are needed. Nobody comes close to being smart as everybody. And here are the excuses. First excuse is why they don't get engaged in pursuing change that they believe in. They're not disagreeing with the change. They believe in it, they see the wrongdoing, they see the need, they see the trust for our children and grandchildren before them. First excuse, they don't have time. Okay? You don't have time, congratulations, you've dropped out of democracy, and you will have to swallow your grievances as you walk through life. But what if they say they do have time? Second excuse, I don't know how to maneuver. I don't know what the rules are. You go to these meetings, they do Robert's rules. Some of the town lawyers or city lawyers tell you to shut up and sit down, and I don't know how to work it. Okay? Well, that's something you can learn. I mean, these are the same people who know how to deal with complex video games, who know how to deal with computers, who know how to deal with detailed instructions on how to build their porch or fix their plumbing. Okay, so let's say they have the time and they know the rules or can learn the rules. Excuse number 3. Well, you know, I'm a little sensitive, they'll say. And I don't like to be smeared. I don't like to be lied about. And I don't like to be intimidated, and at work it can create problems for me. I might not get that promotion. All right, so let's say you get over that. You're not blistered by moonbeams. You live in the USA. You got constitutional rights. So you got the time. You can learn about the rules of engagement, and you're not blistered by moonbeams. Here's the final excuse. Well, even if I do this, even if a lot of us do this, it won't make any difference. Because the big boys run the show. Because the government is in the pockets of the corporations, and the corporations are in the pockets of the government. So why worry about it? Why waste your time? Just eat, drink,